Okay, so we move along to our next panel where we broaden out a little. Well, not a little, we broaden out a lot. We're talking about enhancing the business environment through growth, stability, and cooperation. And this is going to be another interesting panel where we're going to struggle to keep everybody to time, but we'll do our best. So let me invite up for this panel Makis Voridis, who's the Minister of State for Greece, Deborah Wince-Smith, who's the President of the United States Council on Competitiveness, and some leaders from industry, including Dimitris, Chanis, Tzokas, and Nikos Papadoglou, who we will introduce into the conversation as the opportunity arises. Nice to see you again. Take a seat, please. You know what? I'm going to move you back slightly because I can't see everyone. There we go.
Speak in English. What we do?
Up to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can speak in Greek.
You can speak in Greek because we've got the wonderful services of our interpreters. So let's kick off straight away. Greece has a productivity problem, and I come from the UK, so, you know, if I see a productivity problem here, there is one. I think your productivity is some distance below the European average. There's a lot of work to do to catch up. We've got three very different industries with us, and we'll hear from you. But first of all, I'd like to hand over to you and get your thoughts, please, on how we enhance the business environment here in Greece.
Κοιτάξτε, νομίζω έχουμε κάνει ήδη αρκετά και έχουμε βελτιώσει αρκετά αυτήν την πρώτη τετραετία, αλλά και αυτό το χρόνο της διακυβέρνησης. Είχαμε να αντιμετωπίσουμε αρκετά θέματα. Νομίζω από τα βασικότερα που είχαμε να αντιμετωπίσουμε και σε μεγάλο βαθμό λύθηκε και έχει να κάνει με το πάνελ μας εδώ είναι ότι έπρεπε να δημιουργήσουμε ένα σταθερό περιβάλλον, έπρεπε να προσπαθήσουμε να ελαχιστοποιήσουμε το πολιτικό κίνδυνο ο οποίος συνδέεται με τη δραστηριότητα και αυτό προϋπέθεται την πολιτική σταθερότητα και εν συνεχεία έπρεπε να δημιουργήσουμε και μια εμπιστοσύνη, μια σχέση εμπιστοσύνη με τις επιχειρήσεις, διότι είχαμε περάσει και αρκετά εδώ, υπήρχαν δηλαδή διάφορα στάδια όλο το προηγούμενο διάστημα. Νομίζω αυτά τα δύο σε μεγάλο βαθμό κατακτηθήκανε και είναι ένα σημαντικό κομμάτι της επιτυχίας των περιόδων αυτών και της μεγάλης βελτιώσεως που είχε η Ελλάδα σε όλους τους δείκτες. Τώρα, προφανώς, τώρα εδώ υπάρχουν ζητήματα τα οποία πρέπει να πάμε ένα βήμα παραπέρα για να βελτιώσουμε την παραγωγικότητα. Θεωρώ το γεγονός ότι έχουν γίνει μία σειρά από μέτρα που βελτιώνουν, παραδείγματος χάρη που δίνουν δυνατότητες να κανονικοποιήσουμε την εργασία, είναι σημαντικά βήματα αυτά. Και αυτό το οποίο κάναμε τώρα, όπου ουσιαστικά νομοθετήσαμε μια σειρά από ρυθμίσεις που τη μαύρη εργασία ουσιαστικά την μετατρέπουν σε άσπρη, ταυτόχρονα όμως διατηρώντας ευελιξία στις μορφές εργασίας, και αυτό είναι μια μεγάλη δημόσια συζήτηση που γίνεται και τώρα. Το δεύτερο ζήτημα, το οποίο ήταν για μας όμως απασχολούσε πολύ, ήταν φυσικά το τραπεζικό σύστημα. Ερχόμαστε από ένα τραπεζικό σύστημα με πάρα πολύ μεγάλες δυσκολίες. Τώρα το τραπεζικό σύστημα δείχνει να έχει σταθεροποιηθεί αρκετά, αλλά από την άλλη μεριά οφείλουμε να ενισχύσουμε την ανταγωνιστικότητά του. Εξακολουθεί να υπάρχει μια πολύ σημαντική διαφορά ανάμεσα στα επιτόκια καταθέσεων και στα επιτόκια χορηγήσεων, και άρα αυτό, καθώς και στις τραπεζικές προμήθειες, και αυτό επιβαρύνει αρκετά τις επιχειρήσεις. Άλλοι κοστολογικοί παράγοντες που επηρεάζουν τις επιχειρήσεις επίσης έπρεπε να βελτιωθούν και πρέπει να βελτιωθούν. Και αυτό έχει να κάνει, παραδείγματος χάρη, με το κόστος της ενέργειας. Το κόστος των συναλλαγών ευρύτερα με το δημόσιο ήταν από τα μεγάλα θέματα. Επίσης έχει βελτιωθεί σημαντικά μέσα από μια πολύ γρήγορη ψηφιοποίηση των υπηρεσιών του δημοσίου. Άρα νομίζω ότι γίνανε πολλά. Έχουμε να βελτιώσουμε ακόμα περισσότερο, έχουμε δουλειά για να κάνουμε, για να βελτιώσουμε ακόμα περισσότερο το οικονομικό κλίμα και την οικονομική ελευθερία. Υπήρξαν πολλές μεταρρυθμίσεις οι οποίες ενίσχυσαν τον αγωνισμό και ήραν κανονιστικούς περιορισμούς που λειτουργούσαν ως φραγμή στην είσοδο στην επιχειρηματικότητα. Άρα Θεωρώ ότι έχουν γίνει πολλά αυτή την τετραετία, μένουν να γίνουν ακόμα περισσότερα πράγματα, αλλά νομίζω ότι κερδίζουμε την ψήφο εμπιστοσύνης και των επενδυτών. Αυτό φαίνεται σε μεγάλο βαθμό από την προσέλκυση ξένων επενδύσεων. Νομίζω ότι καταλαβαίνουν οι επενδυτές ότι αυτή η κυβέρνηση έχει μπροστά της μια καθαρή τριετία και είναι και αφοσιωμένη και δεσμευμένη στην προσέλκυση των επενδύσεων και είμαστε και σε μια σταθερή σχέση αλληλεπίδρασης με τις επιχειρήσεις, υπό την έννοια ότι διαρκώς ρωτάμε τι είναι εκείνο το οποίο χρειάζεται να γίνει προκειμένου να μπορούν να λειτουργήσουν με μεγαλύτερη αποτελεσματικότητα και ασφάλεια στην Ελλάδα. Νομίζω λοιπόν ότι βαδίζουμε σε αυτή την κατεύθυνση και σε αυτή την κατεύθυνση θα συνεχίσει να προχωράει η κυβέρνηση.
Okay, well, on the right track. I'm looking forward to hearing the judgment of our industry panels, as I'm sure you are. But before we do, Deborah, let's widen this out a bit. This productivity challenge isn't just a Greek problem. It's in much of the Western world in our economies, perhaps slightly less in America, but we are facing a challenge on the productivity front. Your thoughts, please, from an American perspective.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted you started our discussion about productivity, because at the end of the day, that is what we really have to not only grow and sustain, but we have to really identify what are going to be the drivers of productivity going forward in this time of profound turbulence, transition, and transformation. And in the United States, you know, we had a great wave of productivity with the digital revolution, beginning of the 21st century. Our companies were very agile and quick in adapting the first wave of the digital transformation, coupled with the fact that we had a regulatory environment in the United States that both enabled and encouraged the adoption of that technology. But in recent years, as you mentioned, we've had also a decline in productivity, not anywhere on the scale and scope of Europe. You know, between 1996 and 2023, the Eurozone's productivity gap is about 3.2% greater than the US, and in the total EU, it's 2.2%. So that's a very significant gap in productivity. But how do we get to this new wave of productivity that's going to, one, deliver a higher standard of living, drive economic growth, and of course ensure a higher standard of living for our citizens, which is what competitiveness is all about. So, you know, one of the things I want to share with everyone is I love the title of our conference, but I'd like to just adjust the words a little bit. We're saying spiraling through the conflicts in search of opportunities. I would say it's spiraling through the transformations to seize the opportunities. Because we're living now in just an incredible opportunity-rich environment. These technological revolutions. We heard about yesterday AI at great depth, and that was a fantastic discussion. But it's way beyond that. You know, it's this convergence of the digital, the biotech, the nanotech, the cognitive revolutions, and they're all converging and colliding, and they're creating unprecedented opportunities for new products, new services, new ways to live, and they're all dual use. This is very important. All of these productivity challenges, as well as having a huge economic impact on how we live and grow and develop value to our citizens, have huge implications for national security. So what are some of the issues? What are some of the things we need to do, both in the EU and Greece, the United States, to unleash the new wave of productivity? The first, I think, is to recognize that at the end of the day, it's the private sector enterprises that create growth. They create value. And government's responsibility is to shape this enabling environment for innovation and for competitiveness. And that starts really with reaching this right balance, Alasdair, between regulation and unleashing innovation. In the US, I'm sure many in this room perhaps believe we're maybe not as strong on the regulatory side as you are in the EU, but we think that having a very flexible, tempered regulatory environment coupled to a flexible workforce enables our companies to pivot, to take new organizational structures, to really redesign their business practices in a way that they can seize these opportunities. So the regulatory environment, we heard this yesterday on the AI discussion, is, in my view, and I think others, too rigid and too controlling. And even on AI, you know, having regulations this early to control that evolution of this game, I mean, it's just an exponential technology that we're dealing with. We think it's too rigid. And the other thing I want to share on the regulatory environment and how it relates to productivity is that I was really kind of stunned yesterday to realize that in Europe, writ large, and particularly Greece, but we heard this, there is no production capacity for generic pharmaceuticals. And hearing that was shocking to me, because at the end of the day, you have to make things. You can't just be, you know, working in software and services. You have to make things, and not to be able to make generic pharmaceuticals at scale today was kind of shocking to me. And what I learned was that so much of that was because of the regulatory environment. And then, of course, the other ingredient for unleashing productivity and the investment, and we'll talk more about this, is having what I would call an innovation-friendly capital and tax structure, ensuring that you can unleash private capital to invest in very risky ventures. So having a tax system that is not punitive, but also provides some incentives that are fair and transparent, is also a foundational base that governments have a real responsibility to set. So one example of this, finally in the United States, it was actually in the Trump administration, we were able to get a territorial tax system so that we could repatriate profits without double taxation. So the productivity wave is going to be driven by these technologies. We have to have governments that are going to help create the environment, regulatory, tax, and we need, and I hope we'll talk about this, radical collaboration, new models, new partnerships, new alliances to build on the productivity opportunity. Seize the opportunity.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to come back to the Minister if we get the chance a little later to address this issue of the gap between approaches between the US regulatory environment and the European regulatory environment, which is a very striking one. So you can get thinking about that. But before we do, let's move along to our business representatives. As I said, very diverse. We've got construction, we've got payments, and we've got gaming. So we've got quite a range here of diggers and virtual businesses. It does feel, as Deborah says, it does feel that there's so much going on at the moment that in terms of innovation. You know, we're not just with AI, but in so many other areas. This must equal opportunity. You must see opportunity out there, particularly in Greece, where the economy is doing relatively well in a regional context. So tell us your thoughts then about what you need in order to turn these opportunities into real business, real businesses. Go ahead.
Καλημέρα σας, ευχαριστώ πολύ για την πρόσκληση. Συνάδει αρκετά η θεματική του session με τις προκλήσεις που κληθήκαμε να αντιμετωπίσουμε τα τελευταία 4-5 χρόνια στον όμιλο εταιρεών HERACLES. Η καινοτομία, η ανάπτυξη, η αύξηση της ανταγωνιστικότητάς μας ήταν ακριβώς οι πυλώνες εκείνοι στους οποίους βασίσαμε τη στρατηγική μας με ορίζοντα το 2025. Και χαίρομαι να πω πως η ελβετική Holcim, η μητρική μας εταιρεία, δίνει ψήφο εμπιστοσύνης και στη θυγατρική της στην Ελλάδα και το πιστοποιούμε αυτό με ένα πολύ ευρύ και μεγάλο επενδυτικό πλάνο το οποίο έχουμε υλοποιήσει τα τελευταία χρόνια. Χαρακτηριστικά θα σας πω ότι από το 2019 μέχρι το 2023 έχουμε επενδύσει στη χώρα περίπου 170 εκατομμύρια ευρώ στην αναβάθμιση των τεχνολογικών μας εγκαταστάσεων, έτσι ώστε να κάνουμε πράξη το οδικό μας χάρτη για την επανθρακοποίηση των λειτουργιών της, κυρίως της παραγωγικής διαδικασίας τσιμέντου και σκυροδέματος, στην είσοδό μας σε νέες αγορές, καθώς επίσης και στην αύξηση της δραστηριότητάς μας, στην ανάπτυξη της δραστηριότητάς μας στα κομμάτια των λατομείων, αδρανών υλικών και μονάδων ετοίμου σκυροδέματος. Το πρόγραμμά μας από το 2024 μέχρι και το 2027 είναι να επενδύσουμε στη χώρα 600 εκατομμύρια περίπου ευρώ σε αντίστοιχης, αν θέλετε, αντίστοιχες δράσεις, οι οποίες έχουν να κάνουν με την αύξηση της ανταγωνιστικότητάς μας, την ανάπτυξη και την διατήρηση της ηγετικής μας θέσης στα κομμάτια της καινοτομίας και της βιωσιμότητας. Και θα μου επιτρέψετε 2-3 σχόλια σε κάθε έναν από αυτούς τους δύο πυλώνες. Στο κομμάτι της αύξησης της ανταγωνιστικότητάς μας και στην ανάπτυξη, προχωρήσαμε τα τελευταία 3 χρόνια σε 3 μεγάλες εξαγορές. Το 2022 εξαγοράσαμε τον κλάδο σκυροδέματος και αδρανών υλικών της εταιρείας Halips, της Heidelberg στην Ελλάδα. Το 2023 εξαγοράσαμε το μεγαλύτερο ανεξάρτητο παίκτη πάλι στη δραστηριότητα αδρανών και σκυροδέματος. Και πριν από 6 μήνες, το 2024, κάναμε για πρώτη φορά την είσοδό μας σαν οργανισμός στον κλάδο της διαχείρισης των απορριμμάτων στην ανακύκλωση, εξαγοράζοντας έτσι την εταιρεία VAT Recycling πριν από 6 μήνες, η οποία μας δίνει τη δυνατότητα να παράγουμε ανακυκλώσιμα υλικά, να μπούμε στην αγορά των δευτερογενών καυσίμων. Διαχειριζόμαστε σήμερα με 2 εργοστάσια στην Αττική, στη Φυλή και στο Κοροπή, περισσότερους από 150.000 τόνους αστικά απορρίμματα. Όλα αυτά, μαζί με το γεγονός ότι εγκαθιστούμε πλέον νέες πράσινες μονάδες σκυροδέματος, η κορονίδα από αυτών των μονάδων είναι η μονάδα την οποία έχουμε εγκαταστήσει και λειτουργεί τον τελευταίο 1-1,5 χρόνο στο ελληνικό για τη μεγάλη αυτή επένδυση. Όταν περάσουμε στον πυλώνα καινοτομία και βιωσιμότητα, εκεί θα έλεγα ότι η δράση, η επένδυση η οποία είναι η σημαντικότερη από όλες είναι η επένδυσή μας για τον πλήρη μετασχηματισμό του εργοστασίου παραγωγής τσιμέντου που έχουμε στο Αλιβέρι της Εύβοιας, με στόχο το μηδενικό ανθρακικό αποτύπωμα. Είναι μια επένδυση 350 εκατομμυρίων ευρώ. Έχει χρηματοδοτηθεί από το Innovation Fund της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης στο Ταμείο Καινοτομίας με περίπου 130 εκατομμύρια ευρώ και έχει στόχο το net zero carbon, δηλαδή το μηδενικό ανθρακικό αποτύπωμα του εργοστασίου. Ο στόχος μας εκεί είναι στο τέλος του 2028 1 εκατομμύριο τόνοι διοξιδίου του άνθρακα, οι οποίοι σήμερα εκπέμπονται κατ' έτος από το εργοστάσιο του Αλιβερίου, να μηδενιστούν. Και έτσι στο τέλος του 2028 να μπορέσουμε να πούμε ότι παράγουμε τον πρώτο τόνο τσιμέντου στη χώρα, ο οποίος είναι απόλυτα πράσινος, απόλυτα καθαρός, με μηδενικό ανθρακικό αποτύπωμα. Αυτή είναι μια πολύ σημαντική δράση, είναι μια πάρα πολύ σημαντική επένδυση, η οποία έρχεται να συμπληρώσει άλλες δράσεις και επενδύσεις οι οποίες έχουν γίνει τα τελευταία χρόνια και θα γίνουν τα επόμενα χρόνια για την υποκατάσταση πρώτων υλών από εναλλακτικές πρώτες ύλες και στερεών καυσίμων από εναλλακτικά καύσιμα. Αυτή είναι μια πρώτη προσέγγιση όσον αφορά τις δράσεις τις οποίες έχουμε κάνει για την αύξηση της ανταγωνιστικότητάς μας και την ανάπτυξη του οργανισμού σε αυτό το περιβάλλον όπως αναλύθηκε.
Thank you. If we have time, we'll come back and you can talk a little bit about how you could go faster, what it is that stops you from expanding faster. I doubt we will have time, but just in case. Let's move on to Tzokas from winmasters.
Καλησπέρα σας. Στην Ελλάδα λέμε, αν δεν μπενέψεις στο σπίτι σου, θα πέσει να σε πλακώσει. Οπότε είμαι υποχρεωμένος να πω 2 λόγια για την Ελλάδα. In a challenging global and political environment, Greece has managed to become a beacon of stability and growth, capitalizing on the political and cultural reforms that this government is imposing. But we're not here to speak and rest on our laurels, but not to discuss the fundamentals that have been achieved the last 6 years, but rather discuss what can we improve, and not about gaming, but in general about the economy. It is essential to improve access to capital for local and international investments seeking to invest in Greece, especially for mid-sized corporations that are historically the principal drivers and employers of the Greek economy. Enhance and ensure easy-to-attain tax incentives. Ensure investment incentives, including reducing bureaucracy and red tape that historically the government is the Greek economy is suffering from. And a very important area that we need to see is brain regain, along with efforts to link education with real market needs. Allow me to elaborate. In Greece, the banking system is one-way street for financing, attributing 95% of the total finance projects, where the European average is on 80%, and the United States, approximately 50%. Currently, all private and state funding is going through the Greek, it's funneled through the Greek banking system, which is certainly not ideal when taking into consideration the following adverse factors. Cost of money. Greece is suffering from cost of money. Cost of money in Greece is hovering at 6%, where besides the message from the Eurozone to reduce. From studies that are done on EIF, financial index, small and medium enterprises in Greece face one of the highest borrowing rates. I mentioned it before, 6%, where the European average is around 4.5%. On top of that, domestic entrepreneurs experiencing possibly the lowest access to capital in Eurozone. More specifically, the net banking flow, the last 10 months has been reduced. Hence, the role of the government, it's pivotal. We need to encourage the banks to reduce their lending rates and fuel the Greek economy. In addition, the minimal presence of alternative financing in Greece, such as investment companies, private equity funds, pension funds, that are not present in Greece, are hindering the propensity of the Greek government, of the Greek economy to grow. Thus, it is essential to enhance the role of the Recovery Fund and the Hellenic Development Bank that already exists, and develop programs that will co-finance, together with the banks, investments in Greece. Investment incentives are also pivotal. Yes, there is a new development law that is helping. The new development law will, hypothetically, and I believe it will, speed up evaluation and approval procedures. The state has also created various instruments to boost investment activity, such as the Hellenic Development Bank I mentioned before, and the entrepreneurship funds. In addition, NSRF, ESPA, for the Greek speakers, is providing additional capital besides its shortcomings in terms of scope and delays. You must understand how pivotal is the government and the collaboration with the banks. As the framework is put in place, we need to focus on fundamental shortcomings of the Greek economy, which the government does, but we need to enhance it further, which is the minimization of red tape, the enhancement of transparency, that is a work in progress, but most importantly, it's something that I mentioned to the minister before, is time to market. We need to ensure that these investment incentives are reaching a wide number of companies in a timely manner. If I have 2 minutes later on, I will mention one very important area, which is the education. Because if we want to change our production model, we need to change our education model. We need to start producing diplomas and focus on producing experts that will be hired in the real economy.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Nikos Papadoglou, Nexi, tell us your thoughts.
Okay, let me finish from where Thomas left us and try to maybe wrap up the first session. Obviously, a lot of things were heard. We are in the payments industry. We, as Nexi, are present in 25 countries. Just to give you an indication of why I'm trying to wrap everything up. 25 countries across Europe, processing 65% of digital transactions. So only in Greece, through us, we have 16 billion euros coming through us. So we understand exactly what's going on in terms of productivity, consumer insights. We have more than serving 40% of the tourist industry in Greece, so we understand, if tourism is going well, we're doing well. If tourism is not doing well, we're not doing well. But that's not the point. The point is innovation, and I think a lot of things were heard, and how we actually enhance productivity. So I will start with summarizing with what Mr. Voridis said. The government indeed is doing a lot of good steps, and reform is very important. But one thing that we need to do in Greece, but in Europe as well, is stability. Things need to be more stable for investments to happen. Just to give you an idea, in the last 2 years, foreign companies have invested more than 1.5 billion in our industry in Greece, putting a lot of, let's say, effort and a lot of trust in the Greek economy going forward. Very good indeed. In order for us to be successful as a country, we need regulatory as well input. So we need that reform. It needs to be stable, and it needs to be in a way that the market can breathe. I had a very interesting discussion just before coming up here, meaning that we are trying to bring more taxation. We're trying to create a stable environment with less tax evasion. Very good indeed. But we need to understand that across the world this is the case, and it needs to take time in order for this to happen. And therefore, that's why we need to take measures that they last longer, but they also incentivize people not to do tax evasion. So a reform of putting in the market a mandatory request is good, but it doesn't always work. It backfires. Innovation will happen because what we see is in the digital world, we're seeing a lot of the cash being actually becoming digital. We are growing in double-digit numbers, double-digit on a year over year, and we see that across the world, we're going to see 1.3 billion wallets actually being used very, very, very. Now we're growing in Greece, just to give you an indication, 25% year on year in terms of tap and pay, meaning people are actually using their phone or their watch and so on in order to do digital payments. And in order to do that, and Mr. Tzokas said that, brain regain is very important, and how you actually bring people back to Europe from the US. And I heard somebody said the other day, they asked, what do you want to do? And somebody said, I would like to go to the US and work. I believe that it was on Wednesday's night dinner. Indeed, most people that actually are in our world in fintech, they would like to go and create and develop their company in the US and not in Europe, not in Greece. So regulation, very important. Stability on the regulation and the measures and the taxation. And education, of course, is very important in order to actually create the grounds in order to enhance productivity, which will come in the years. It will not have a peak and then fall.
Minister, there's an awful lot there. I think that was a very rich, very insightful set of comments from business representatives. So there's a lot there for you to address, but I'd also like you to briefly address the point that Deborah raised about this difference between regulatory approach in Europe and in America. Do we regulate too much?
Okay. You're actually talking to a supporter of deregulation. So, but on the other hand, let me try and explain what we are doing now in Greece, especially in the regulatory field. One of the things is what we call good legislation. The good legislation is meaning, if you see our laws, the laws that have passed all these years, there is a final article saying there, but we have legislated this and this and this, but now we abolish this and this and this. So we're always trying to keep a balance in what we regulate and we think that represents the needs of public interest for the time being, but also trying to lift other provisions that are of no use and trying to keep a balance
net
there.
zero in red tape.
Trying to do that, okay? We're not always successful, but we are trying to do that. Now, the other thing, of course, is that I think in this question, how much regulation? The correct answer, I'm not sure is how much, is what for. The thing that you need to address is that you have, let's say, have a principle, that's my principle, that when I do not see a vital public interest in legislating, then you do not legislate. Then you're trying to create free space for the businesses to work. But on the other hand, trying to address your question, is there a difference between US and EU? I think that this has to do mostly with the priorities that we in EU have and are of primary concerns to us, and we are trying to be champions there. For example, environment protection. So, yeah, in Europe, we want to be champions into, let's say, protecting our seas, our environment, and this does create the need for regulation. But on the other hand, this type of regulations, we must accept that it creates new jobs. Because in protecting the environment, you have, for example, all these growing business environment of renewable. I'll give you a very, I don't know if I have time, but a very quick example. Trying to address the wildfires and the problem with that, we saw that there is a tremendous productive change in our forests. Now, why is that? Because 40 or 50 years ago, there were small villages and people trying to get wood trying to heat themselves. They were out in the forests collecting the wood that was around there. Now, since they moved from the villages and they went to the cities, now this job is not being carried out. So every year, it's full of wood, ready to burn, out there. Now, what did we do through regulation? We have now given the opportunity to businesses to go into the forest and collect all this type of wood, and this has created a new type of activity, of business activity. So, yeah, through regulation, sometimes trying to address problems, you are creating, let's say, new jobs. This is an example. But the other thing I'd like to say is also that sometimes it's even businesses that they are asking for regulations. So they come to us and they say, look, we need somehow to see how you think the work that we do needs to be regulated. So they are asking for regulation. So you see, always there is a balance there on what you should and you should not do. I think, though, that coming from, let's say, decades in where there was a different perspective from what I am elaborating now, the perspective is that it's the state that needs to do the job, and that's why we need regulation, because we do not want to have this type of free space. Decades ago, many years, we had this kind of perception in legislation. Now, we need to change that. We need to put this criterion. The criterion is the need for legislation should be clear. It should be serving a specific public interest, a specific, let's say, moral mandate there that we have to address by legislating. And if not, then the state should withdraw and we should deregulate it. That's what we do. That's what we're trying to do. I think in Greece, we do create free space, but I take notes of all the comments that the gentlemen have made, and of course, also coming from the American experience. And that is the banking environment, which is very important, and that's why I say we should always enhance banking competition. That's the answer to that. And so we need to have more of that. Also, of course, they need to have a stability, political stability. And this does require, let's say, a broader agreement. We are a stable government, 158 parliamentaries, so a clear majority in the parliament. The next 3 years is a very clear, let's say, perspective on what we can do. But it would be nice if we could have a broader agreement among the political spectrum, especially on broad issues, like, for example, business taxation. And yes, we need to address tax evasion. I will close with one thing, which goes back to productivity. There is, this moment that we're talking, there is a huge transformation in the business environment. Why? Because small businesses are being, they accept the pressure and the need that they will have to comply with their legal and tax obligations. Now, if they comply and they remain competitive, that's fine. But if they don't, then obviously they have other businesses that they will take their places, obviously existing, creating more healthy and more powerful business units, and that means more competitive and more productive. Now, this transformation in business economy is happening as we are talking. I suppose I need to finish that. Yeah.
Your comment on, your comment on not getting involved unless you have to, makes me think we should put you in charge of VAR in football. That would be a tremendous step forward. Your comments on competitiveness bring us back, I think, to Deborah. I'm sure you're itching to comment on a lot of what you've heard about, but I would like to give you an opportunity to talk a bit more about the importance of collaboration, cooperation. What do you mean by that? Expand that out for us.
Well, I want to first say, before I address that I think under the Mitsotakis administration, there's been tremendous progress in Greece, and Greece should be very proud of that, what you've accomplished. And one area that's underway right now is the new regulations that will enable private universities to come and partner here in Greece, and in my view, create a regional education hub. We know how smart Greeks are. We know the Greek diaspora, certainly in the United States. I mean, I can tell you how many university presidents are Greek Americans, heads of R&D, all of that with this new regulation that's very creative and complex, nonetheless, is going to create a whole new wave of innovation. And we heard from the CEO of Pfizer, the tech hubs and things. Marrying that with the academic and research environment is going to be a very powerful stimulator for growth and innovation. So that's very, very exciting, and I commend Greece for its tremendous progress. In terms of collaboration, I'll share one example. And I ask a few colleagues here, if anybody wants to tell me, and if you know the answer, you can't tell it. Nikos, which city in the United States is the fastest growing city right now? Does anybody want to guess? Yes. Nashville, Tennessee. And the whole Tennessee environment now is what they're calling one of radical collaboration. So we just at the U.S. Council on Competitiveness, we've launched a whole series of what we're calling competitiveness conversations across America to really address the parts of the nation, interior, not the coast, that need to be included in the innovation ecosystems of the future. And we first went to Tennessee. So we had two universities, Vanderbilt, University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, the CEOs, the governor, the senators. We had all the mayors, Memphis, Chattanooga, Nashville, Knoxville, all come together. And they have an alignment around how they are going to move ahead all ready to be the center for next generation batteries, for electrification of mobility, advanced manufacturing, et cetera. How are they doing that? They're doing it through collaboration. These partnerships now, very advanced, complex research partnerships with universities, national labs, Volkswagen America, Nissan America, Ford, they're all part of that. And that is also occurring, very excitingly, in Europe as well. I just came from Birmingham. Birmingham, we know, the heart of the Industrial Revolution, went into decline, lost its manufacturing. They have an amazing strategy now, the West Midlands strategy, to move into the future. It's all about collaboration and partnerships, but designing these in a way that build on the assets, but are win-win, and attract the investment, attract the human capital to transform regions. And that's even occurring here in Greece. I can think of places like Ioannina. So collaboration has to be more than just collaboration around co-investment. It has to be identify your assets and strengths, where you want to be, and create the roadmap of how to bring in everyone that needs to be at the table. And that includes labor. It includes the workforce. It includes all the things that make people want to invest, live, and grow in parts of a nation and a country. And it's a very, very exciting time. So it's radical collaboration.
Excellent. I would love to extend this conversation. I think you guys would have, it'd be interesting to hear your views on this sort of conflict between collaboration and competition, because both have to exist but we don't have time, unfortunately, so we can't do it. We'll have to continue at some other time. It's coffee time now, but before you head off, please join me in thanking what's been an excellent panel. Thank you.